Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. It's your host, Sharon Smith. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you all have an amazing, holiday today. I hope you are able to spend time with your families. I hope you're able to, you know, eat some good food. I hope, if you asked for some things, if that's how you celebrate Christmas, I hope you're able to get a few of the things that you asked for. And I'm well aware that some people do not celebrate Christmas, but I still hope you have an amazing day. And for those out there who might be, celebrating Christmas in a less traditional way, I still hope you enjoy your Christmas. And so, something to talk about is this is going to be a slightly different episode. And really, that episode is just going to be I'm going to talk about the NBA and the NFL. I'm going to talk about the NBA because kind of in years past, Christmas and the NBA kind of go hand in hand, and so earlier, a few weeks back, maybe about a month or two ago now, I had talked about talking about sports more, and I didn't quite carry through with that. And the easiest way to carry through with me talking about more sports is now. And I have been watching other sports like college football. I paid attention to the season as best as I could. I did watch some of the first round of the college football playoffs. Like I watched, the Alabama versus Oklahoma game, and I will admit when Oklahoma was up basically 17-0, I believe, 17-0, 17-7, I'm thinking that this is just going to be a boring game. Little did I know that, Alabama was going to score basically 34 straight and basically win that game. I did not watch all of the Texas A&M and Miami game. I watched as much of it as I could, but went back to rewatch it, and that was just a defensive game. Like, oh my god! And I know Notre Dame fans, they were probably watching that game, with not some hate in their heart. Um, and I did not watch the Tulane versus Ole Miss and the James Madison University versus Oregon games. And those games caused a lot of people to be talking about the playoff format, which I'm not the expert in talking about how the format should be. I think that however many teams, in this instance 12, as long as it's the best 12 teams, I think that's what's important. And not this weekend, but New Year's Eve, there will be more college football, which we will be talking about the second round of the college football playoffs in more detail then, because I do believe all of those games will be great games. So enough about that. We're going to talk about the Christmas Day NBA games, starting with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. I feel like this game could be either weirdly good or super exciting. Both teams, are pretty good record-wise in the standings in the Eastern Conference. And earlier this year, in about October, before Halloween, these two teams played, and the Knicks ended up winning that game. And yes, on the box score it was close, but it did not really seem all that close, if you were able to catch that game as it happened. Yes, Donovan Mitchell started out hot. He had a great first quarter. Then after that, the Cavs, they didn't really do much. And, it was kind of that fourth quarter where, like, teams are, trying to get back in it, but, time is not on their side sort of thing. And the Cavs, really just my impression of the Cavs and Knicks, in a way, have kind of had similar, like, disappointing postseasons, like the Cavs last year. It's very disappointing. Very disappointing. The Knicks kind of have been a little similar, but I think for the Cavs, if Evan Mobley, which he is a defensive anchor, he is great on the defensive end. But I think if he gets a consistent jumper, that just adds another element of things to watch out for. Because, with Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, they've got, a pretty good bench in my opinion. I think they've got a good team, and I think they have a good rotation. I think in past years, health had been just a major concern of this team. And for the Knicks, this could be their year, even though that the Pistons have, the best record in the Eastern Conference. But the Knicks have, that playoff experience that, yes, the Pistons did make it last year, and they definitely have some playoff experience. But I think the Knicks' playoff experience kind of goes to another level, in my opinion. And I feel like the Knicks, even though that the Celtics are surprising people, they're, I believe, the number 3 seed, basically, in the, what do you call it? In the Eastern Conference. And yes, I'm kind of combining, football lingo with like the seeds. But 3 seed, third best record. Actually, no, you call people seed. You'll say like the first seed, second seed. Sorry, that was just me kind of, rambling a little bit. But I think that, for the Knicks, that with you don't have to worry about Jason Tatum. You know that Jalen Brown has been, having a, a decent season this year, even though that, earlier there was those hairline situations, which I'm not going to get into that. Um, the Bucks with trading Giannis, it just I feel like trade talks keep ramping up. Um, I feel like the Knicks are kind of like cursed, similar to how like the Cowboys are, or if you want to say the Jets or Giants. I feel like they're just cursed. I'm not going to talk much more about these teams besides for give me the Knicks to win this game. I feel like Brunson is going to score 30 plus points. The Spurs versus the Thunder. These two teams just might be the best teams in the NBA. And in the past about 2 weeks, the Spurs kind of have the Thunder's number because in the NBA Cup final, the Spurs did get the win over the Thunder. It was a very close game. And, I think it was a few days ago where actually it was last night. I'm recording this on Christmas Eve. The Spurs ended up beating the Thunder by like 20. And, that is insane because there was all this talk about, OKC basically having a chance to break the Warriors 73-9 record, which, they lost 3 times in the last 2 weeks, which don't get me wrong, that's nothing crazy, but like if they really were trying to get this record, they would have to basically lose like one game a month from, January until playoffs start in April. But they'd have to lose like one game a month if they have no room for error. Because like Draymond Green did say it that like you know basically health being the biggest reason as to why these the OKC could like break the record, but they're such a young team, so like they could potentially still break it. And the Spurs, they've been linked to getting Giannis for a while. This season, and me personally, I would not do this trade. I would not. Now you're probably all thinking, the basketball fans out there like, Sharon, why would you not do it? Because like there's some packages that the Spurs could put together and still keep a lot of their young core. But I get the feeling that the Bucks are probably going to want a certain player that the Spurs do not want to trade. Like Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, great guards. We all know about Wemby. Um, which Wemby basically he had I think he drew an offensive like he fouled Chet Holmgren, and then he proceeded to do like a windmill in a half court setting, which is just insane. But I do feel like the three of them could just be an amazing like team for the future. Like if the Spurs are able to get a couple of rings, I feel like these three could be a big part in it. But we will see. We will see. I can understand wanting to get Giannis because Giannis is still an amazing player. But Giannis, you also have to acknowledge the fact that he is older. Not like he's not like LeBron James older. Let me just make sure that that is clear. So my question to you is, let's just say, do you think you will get 5 to 10 good years from Giannis over getting 5 to 10 from, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, and Wemby? That's the question I'm going to pose for you all. Because if you think you're going to get the same amount of good years if you trade for Giannis compared to if you don't, then that's one thing. But I think that there's a bright future with, those three players and building the team around them. And I think that this is going to be a potential Western Conference Finals matchup as long as these teams, continue to tread in this direction and stay healthy. But I'm going to take OKC. I think that they're going to bounce back from the 20-point loss. And I think that this game will be decided in the final minute. I think this game is going to be a 1-2 point game, maybe even going down to the final shot. Mavs versus Warriors moving on. I think 3 years ago this was going to be a crazy game, but now it's just, I don't really got much to say. The Warriors are kind of like what they were to me last year, mostly Steph, and you're staying, slightly above 500. I think they're about 15-15 right now, the 8th seed in the Western Conference. And, from watching basketball earlier in the season to now, Cooper Flag does look like a completely different player because, like, he's found, his, like, confidence a little bit. He scoring 20 plus, 30 plus. He's been having a great month. And I think he'll be able to have a decent game against the Warriors. I think this game is going to be a shootout. I think whether or not, if Anthony Davis plays or not, I think that this is going to be a shootout. Give me the Warriors to win this game. Rockets versus the Lakers. Old man Bron versus old man KD. The two of the greatest small forward, power forwards of my lifetime. Now, I understand that, official rosters might call one of them like KD a power forward, LeBron a power forward. But in my mind, they're small forwards. I would say that KD is more of a power forward because even though that websites might list KD at 6'9" or whatever, but nah, I'm sorry. That man is a 7 footer. That man's a 7 footer. Ever since, there's the picture, I think the Olympic picture, this is a long time ago, of Kevin Durant standing next to DeMarcus Cousins. And DeMarcus Cousins, I believe, is 6'11", and Kevin Durant was taller than DeMarcus Cousins. I'm like, yeah, no, there is nothing nobody can tell me to say that Kevin Durant is not a 7 foot, athlete. But um, I think I think both of these teams, I feel like are pretty even in terms of like how good I think these rosters are, and they're both, the Western Conference is so close. I feel like overall both conferences are pretty close in terms of like if you lose a game, you might fall from the second seed down to the seventh seed type stuff. But Austin Reeves has been probably the biggest surprise of this young NBA season because when Bron was out, this man was averaging a crazy amount of points, and he's still doing well. And yes, last night he came back from a calf injury and he dropped, I believe, about 17 points off the bench, which I think for me, to be honest, because I think people kind of wonder how much longer LeBron's going to play. If I'm the Lakers, I'm kind of having Luka obviously be my number one scoring option, Austin Reeves be second, and LeBron be third. Obviously, when LeBron his shots are falling, have him be your number one scoring option. But like, I feel like you would get more meaningful stuff for LeBron. And also, I know that it's crazy for me to say have LeBron as the third scoring option, but I feel like when you have three guys on a team who can go get a bucket, you can view them as option 1A, 1B, and 1C. Like, just they're all great scorers of the basketball. But I'm going to take the Rockets to get this game because I feel like Kevin Durant is going to have an amazing game. I think he is going to lead both teams in scoring. Like, I think if he puts up 40, no other person will have more than 40. Give me the Rockets. For the final Christmas Day game, and before we talk about the NFL, it's between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. My favorite player in the NBA right now is just Anthony Edwards. I don't really know why he's just my favorite. He just is. And I do also think Nikola Jokic is one of the best players in the league. And I feel like the Nuggets this year, I feel like their bench has been the biggest improvement. But I think the only question I have about them right now is their defensive consistency. Because their offense, I feel like, has just been much improved from last season. And I get it, there's still a lot of time to, kind of say that, like, okay, yeah, Jaren, this team is significantly improved from last year. But I'm going to take the Nuggets to win this game because I think Nikola Jokic is going to do usual Nikola Jokic type things. Now we're going to talk about the NFL. We're just going to go straight into it. Let me know your thoughts about, I had about the NBA down below. In future NBA episodes, I do plan to, talk more in detail about, certain teams. But I figure spending the first 15 minutes was a great starting point. So last week for the NFL, week 16, I had a 13-3 record. My wins came from Seattle, the Bears, the Eagles, the Chargers, the Vikings, the Bengals, the Panthers, the Saints, the Bills, the Jags, the Falcons, the Texans, and the 49ers. My losses came from the Lions, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. Before I kind of go any further, I'm going to talk about the Ravens because earlier, in the season, I talked about the Falcons being the most disappointing team, but I can now say it's the Ravens. I understand that the Ravens had a lot of injuries and they are 1-5, but to all of the people out there who were thinking that the Ravens are going to win the AFC North, coming back from a 1, you are crazy. And I understand that me saying this, it can, the Ravens can shock the world on Saturday. And, the Browns, even I don't think they're going to upset the Steelers. They can upset the Steelers, giving the Ravens a chance. But I think even with a chance, I don't know. And I think that this Ravens team is just they're just so horrible at managing a fourth quarter. The last 12 minutes of the game, how do you not give Derrick Henry, the number one player that the Patriots could not stop? How do you not give him the football? How do you not? And I remember it was 4th and 4. The Ravens, I believe, were about midfield. I said to my dad, I was sitting next to him, Dad, I think the Ravens should go for this. You've got your backup quarterback in. The Patriots offense was starting to, move down the field a little bit easier. You're not getting a consistent pass rush unless you blitz. And even then, Drake May was, beating the Ravens up in the blitz. I would win for it because if you go for it and do not get it, I don't think the Patriots we're going to be able to drain as much clock. But if the Ravens were to go for it and get it, I don't think the Patriots are going to come back, and score 10 points in 2 minutes. I know it's possible, but I did not think that was probable. And Zay Flowers, because the Pro Bowl games announcers was announced. I do not know how Zay Flowers is one of the receivers, which, if I'm just being completely honest, he has 2 touchdowns and 3 fumbles on the season. I love Zay Flowers. I think he's an amazing athlete. I think he's just somebody who runs, east and west and not north and south. Like, when he did that move before that fumble, I'm like, I just knew something bad was going to happen. He had too much space in front of him, which I'm like, I know that's a crazy thing to say. But I'm sorry, I do not think Zay Flowers is deserving of a Pro Bowl spot. I really don't. I think if you have 2 touchdowns and 3 fumbles, you're not deserving of that. If you would have said he had 7 touchdowns and 3 fumbles, then I'm like, I think he's deserving of that. I don't think that's as bad because like his yardage is not bad. I think his touchdowns being the only thing that's just hurting his case in my opinion. It's just hurting his case. And also the Ravens are also tied with the most Pro Bowlers in the NFL, and they're 7-8. They are 7-8. That's just crazy for me to even think about. And so the other thing I'm going to talk about with the Ravens before I kind of, go into, all the games. In the last 5 years, the Ravens have 11 blown leads. That is the most in the NFL by far. John Harbaugh has the most blown leads since 1992. That is insane. And there's a graphic that every time the Ravens have blown a lead in the last 5 years, it starts to get trending on Twitter. I'm going to read to you some of these some of these scores and the situations. I'm not going to read to you every one because it's a long list. I'll read to you a few in the Lamar Jackson era and the ones after. Lamar Jackson in the COVID season 2020, they were beating the Titans 21-10 with 5 minutes and 33 seconds left in the third. Yes, 21-10 is not a crazy lead, and there's still a lot of time after that, but you had a lead nonetheless. The most crazy loss that the Ravens have on here is, I want to say, in the following season. They were beating Miami 35-14 in the fourth quarter. They still lost. Other games on here that were crazy. They were beating the Giants 20-10 with 6 minutes left in the fourth. This was, I believe, in 2022, Brian Dable's first season with the Giants when he was their head coach. And I don't remember the season exactly for this one, but when the Ravens were beating the Jaguars 19-10 with less than 6 minutes remaining. And then last year, when after losing to the Chiefs on, opening night and then playing the Raiders the next week, the Ravens were beating the Raiders 23-13, and then they ended up losing that game. That's just a handful of them. I might try to throw up this graphic in this episode. I got the graphic from Twitter, and I'm sure that there's more games that people could look at for this. But why am I reading to you some of these football games? I think that if the Ravens want to win a Super Bowl, I don't think they're going to be able to do it with John Harbaugh. I don't. And I think the Ravens are in a situation where it is going to be very hard to fire John Harbaugh because I think he's maybe had about 1 or 2 bad seasons record-wise. And I don't think he should be fired for if the Ravens finish, let's just say 7-10. I don't think he should be fired for having a 7-10 record. I think that the fact that I don't think that they're going to win a Super Bowl with John Harbaugh as a head coach with Lamar Jackson as their quarterback. They have had so much talent on their team the last couple of years. They've been a Super Bowl favorite some of these years. And to see, this current Seattle head coach, Mike McDonald, basically the Seattle has, they're 12-3 right now. They're the best record in the NFC. That is just crazy. The defense did its job against Kansas City in 2023. Defense was not why they lost that game. But that's not what I'm arguing. I think that with all the talent on the Ravens roster, I think John Harbaugh is not capable of bringing, the talent out, of this team. I think the fourth quarter play calling on the offensive side has just been pretty bad. I think that, defense, this defense, there's not much you can do. And even though that, yes, the defense has been playing better since I have been calling it out earlier in the season, I think that there's not as much that you can do with this defense to, have them hold up. And like the Browns are like a perfect example of the Browns have kept you in pretty much almost every game. But if the offense is not able to, do their part, things are going to get out of hand eventually. I don't think, and there's video of Isaiah Likely basically saying, we are but, and I'm not using the exact words that he had said, but that is enough of me kind of ranting. We're going to talk about the Christmas Day games. Let me also know what you think about my comments about the Ravens down below. We're going to talk about the Cowboys versus Commanders first. I ain't got too much to say about this game. Marcus Mariota is supposedly not going to play. Jaden Daniels already out for the year. Give me the Cowboys to win this game 27-14. Moving on to the Lions versus Vikings. The Lions, they need this game bad because, last week against the Steelers, they lost on the last play of the offensive pass interference, which when I saw that in live time, I'm thinking like, wow, they really just won this game. And then, obviously there was the talk about with the flags. And then once they showed a different angle of Amon Ra who had caught that pass and how it was offensive pass interference, like, I get it. I get it. But it was a crazy play to say the least. JJ McCarthy might not even, actually not might not even, he's already been ruled out for this game. And I wonder if Max Brosmer, the guy who played against Seattle, I wonder if he's going to play again. But yeah, give me the Lions to win. This is going to be a blowout, 38-7. And then the cap off the Christmas Day games, you have the Broncos versus the Chiefs. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a very entertaining game. Patrick Mahomes obviously has a ACL injury. Gardner Minshew last week, he hurt his knee. He's done pretty much for the season. I don't know the name of their quarterback off the top of my head, but it is just crazy. It's crazy to me to expect the Chiefs to do anything against the Broncos right now. And the Chiefs quarterback this tomorrow is going to be Chris Oladokun. I'm just gonna call him Chris. Now, the Chiefs are obviously going to be the underdog, but most of America does not collect the Chiefs, so they're probably going to hope that the Broncos blow out the Chiefs. But at the very least, I'm going to hope that their quarterback plays well. Oh yeah, I'm going to hope that at least. But give me the Broncos to win this game 35-7. And by the way, you're probably saying, Jaron, how do I hope the Chiefs quarterback plays well if I only anticipate them putting up 7? I just hope that this quarterback doesn't throw for like 5 interceptions on a primetime game. So moving on to the Saturday games. So we have the Texans versus Chargers. This is going to be a battle. This does affect the AFC playoff picture a little bit because of basically it might affect, potential like who finishes as the 5th seed, the 6th seed, who finishes as one of those. And so this could affect who has a favorable matchup because if the Texans finish, as the 5th seed, they might go up against like Pittsburgh or the Chargers, vice versa. I'm going to take the Chargers to win this. Not the Chargers. I'm sorry. I'm going to take the Texans to win this one, 24-21. Yes, they had a little bit of a scare against the Las Vegas Raiders, but I think their defense is just too good. I think they're going to get right this week, 24-21. Now, the potential downfall, the official end of the Ravens season might be this Saturday night. And the ironic thing is they're playing against the Packers, my mom's favorite team. So, what do I think is going to happen? Me predicting this game is going to be very similar to how the Ravens and Bears game was earlier this year. Because at the time, it was not Lamar Jackson it was talked about like he was going to play against the Bears. And then, it was announced that he wasn't going to be suiting up. It was going to be Tyler Huntley. Now, I think that, with everything Lamar Jackson has been through this season, if I was in charge, I would play Tyler Huntley. I understand your playoff hopes are on the line. Some jobs are on the line. I understand that. But I think that, even if the Ravens win this game, they beat the Steelers, and they somehow make it to the playoffs, I think that Lamar Jackson, with as banged up as he is, it might affect next season. I would not be surprised if it's announced that Lamar Jackson gets some kind of surgery, like March or April. It is just insane. Like, I'm sure you all saw the graphic on Sunday Night Football with just how much that he's been dealing with. Now, on the Packers side, Jordan Love got knocked out with a concussion against the Bears last week, which Bears fans, let me know how you're feeling right now. Let me know how you're feeling down below in the comments. Because that was a crazy game against Green Bay. And then Malik Willis, the backup, who played pretty darn well. He's kind of banged up with the shoulder right now. So if these two guys do not play, I'm kind of curious as to what's going to happen. Um, yeah, I'm kind of curious because if none of these guys play, I will give the nod to the Ravens, even with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. I think if Jordan Love plays, yeah, I don't think the Ravens defense is going to slow down the Packers offense. But I think if Malik Willis plays, I think the Ravens will have a chance. I'm going to take the Ravens to win this game 27-20. I think this game is going to be close regardless of if Jordan Love or Malik Willis plays in this game. Moving on to Sunday's games, the Bucks versus Miami. But first, before I got to say who I think is going to win, the Bucks fall off's got to be studied. And I will admit that, in the first few weeks, I was overhyping Baker Mayfield. I really was. I will not, deny that. And ever since, starting out about 5-1, this team has just been on a downward spiral. Um, it's just insane. And Miami, they had a bad loss against the Steelers on, last week and not last week on Monday. I'm sorry. And yeah, it was announced that their head coach is going to continue to be their head coach next season. Um, but I'm just kind of curious if the Dolphins are going to change their mind. Give me the Bucks to actually win this one 28-14. Moving on to the Patriots versus the Jets. This, I promise you, I'm not attempting to hate. I'm just going to say the fact. Did you know there is a team that the Patriots are tied with one of the worst teams record-wise in the league with the amount of wins they have against teams that are above 500. I'll give you a minute to guess, I'll give you a moment to guess the team that they have the same amount of wins as against teams 500 or above are. If your guess is not the New York Football Giants, your guess is incorrect. Yes, the Patriots have beaten two teams above 500 this season, while the Jets, who are 2-13, have done the same. Um, you know, I like I know that this season I've been talking about the Patriots, and they probably were hearing that Jaren's talking trash about us. We got to beat his favorite team, the Ravens. All jokes aside, I I think the Patriots are better than their schedule has dictated. Because like you can only play who's on your schedule. And by the way, if you are curious to as of the two teams that they've beaten with a 500 or better record, one of them is definitely the Buffalo Bills. And I'm curious as if I wonder if the other team is going to be considered the Panthers. Um, I'm not sure because I have to go back and double check if the Falcons were above 500. When the Patriots and Falcons played earlier this year. Same for the Bucks. I'd have to go back and double check. And it's very possible that when I saw that stat, it was slightly taken out of context. It's very possible. I'm not sure, but it is just crazy to think about. Give me the Patriots to be the Jets though with ease. I'm gonna say 24-10. Steelers versus the Browns. Talking about the DK Metcalf situation. Apparently DK Metcalf, had warned the NFL, about the particular fan, on Sunday with that situation. And they had been warned when DK Metcalf was on the Seahawks last season. And so I guess the only thing that I have to say is DK Metcalf is already kind of known as a hothead, like in the league, like easier to rile up. But I think that him being caught on video punching that fan is what did him in. Don't get me wrong. I think if the NFL would have found out that he punched a fan, I think the NFL was going to do pretty much what they ended up doing to him. But it just he's gonna miss their next two games. Which do I think that's gonna penalize them in the long run? Like the Steelers have the Browns this weekend, and they have the Steelers. And they have the Steelers, and they have the Ravens. I think the Steelers might miss DK Metcalf more against the Browns than they will against the Ravens. I think the only way they'll miss DK Metcalf against the Ravens is if the Ravens win this weekend and the Steelers lose. That's when they might miss DK Metcalf against the Ravens, because when the Steelers and Ravens played the last time, the Steelers opened up the game with a 55-yard bomb to DK Metcalf. That's where it might hurt. That is where it might hurt. So, do I think the Browns can upset the Steelers? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, any given Sunday is always a thing. Something that I've believed, my entire life. And earlier in the season when the Steelers and Browns played, Dylan Gabriel was the quarterback. That is a key detail to mention. I think and it's also been proven that Shedeur Sanders also brings a different element to the Browns offense. Do I think that the Steelers are going to win with ease against the Browns? No, but I think they've got a fair shot. Give me the Steelers to win this game 20-17, but this is a potential upset watch. Jags versus the Colts. The first thing I got to say is that, about the Colts with Phillip Rivers, I was surprised, them getting, a 44-year-old Phillip Rivers to save their season, which, last against the Seattle, it didn't really pan out as much, but against the 49ers, he was balling. He was balling. Yes, he threw a pick six at the end of the game, but, there's like been the footage of him, going up, making checks to the line. He's saying everything, which that is cool. And like, kind of something that I thought is like, we don't really see that as much anymore, like him making call outs to like that extent. That's something that more when Peyton Manning, Tom Brady and the Patriots, Drew Brees, Big Ben, that's something that we would have saw then. And there's a lot more guys who would analyze the game like, Phillip Rivers does, but we don't see that as much anymore. Um, so yeah, I think the Colts, their playoff chances are pretty slim. And the Jags, they're red hot right now. They beat the Broncos last week, and they have a path to the number one seed. I think the Jags, I think they want to show to the world that hey, we're legit and we're going to be one of the best teams in the AFC. And hey, with how uncertain football has been this year, they could make some noise in the playoffs. I'm going to take the Jags to win in a close one, 35-28. Saints versus the Titans. Something that I did not know is that the Saints are on a winning streak. It is very possible for them to close out their season on a 5-game winning streak, which is crazy. It is crazy to say. Based in the last, they beat the Bucks, they beat the Panthers, they beat the Jets. I do think that they can beat the Titans, and I do think that they can beat the Falcons. The Falcons, yes, they beat them, the Saints 24-10, just a few weeks ago. But I think that, the Saints, Tyler Shuck, he's been playing pretty good. He has been playing pretty good. Yeah, I know earlier in the year, I kind of talked about how I thought they should bring in a veteran quarterback, which I do think that kind of still stands, a little bit. But I think right now, my take is shifting their focus to, I think, kind of starting building up the trenches. I think, Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, I think they both have played decent football. They both have, good stats considering the teams that they're on. And the Titans last week, they beat, the Chiefs, which I was not expecting even with, Mahomes being out, them being eliminated. But, Cam Ward, he had, arguably his best game in the NFL against the defense that is pretty good. Like, let that be in mind. It's the Chiefs offense that, has suffered last week specifically. By that, I mean, you're missing your leader in Patrick Mahomes. But that defense still has people like Chris Jones on it, still has Trent McDuffie, still has, a good group of linebackers, and it's still very well coached, mind you. I'm going to take the Saints to get another win. I think Tyler Shuck is going to lead a 2-minute drive to win the game. I'm going to take the Saints to win 23-16. Seahawks versus the Panthers. This is a big game for both teams. The Panthers because, they got the win over the Bucks last week. They're trying to stay ahead of the Bucks, and getting a win, is going to be huge. Even though that, yes, they're going to have to beat the Bucks again in the final week. The Seattle, they have a path to the 1 seed. If they continue to win out, they will get it. And the Bears are just 1 game behind potential a 1 seed, a bye week. I did not, nobody outside of, that Chicago Bears locker room expected this. I could go to 10 Bears fans that I know personally. I would be confident in saying that all of them would be like, Jaron, I didn't see the Bears winning, 8 or 9 games this year. But hey, they did it. And Seattle, that has to be their game has to be in one of the game of the year conversation. After the final week, I'm gonna put, I'm gonna try to narrow down a top 5 on what I think some of the best games are of the season. But that I believe deserve their game against the Rams last Thursday. I believe deserves a nominee. I think this game between Seattle and the Panthers can go down to the wire. I'm gonna pick Seattle to win this game 28-24, making the battle for the NFC South in Week 18 very interesting. Moving on to Arizona versus the Bengals. The Bengals, they lit up the scoreboard last week. Arizona, I don't really have much to say about them. I'm just curious, what's going to happen to Kyler Murray in the offseason. I'm gonna take the Bengals to win this one 31-30. I think the Bengals are gonna, win, their last two games and then, just go all in next season, potentially. Moving on to the, we'll say, Toilet Bowl, by Toilet Bowl, which is a fantasy football term. Um, the Giants versus the Raiders. Whoever loses this game is likely going to get the first round pick. Um, which of these teams do I think is worse? I think that's a toss up, but I think Afton Genty is going to have a good game. So I'm going to take the Raiders to win this game 23-20. And also, speaking about fantasy football for a minute, real quick. So, in my one league that I had made the playoffs in, I had made a costly mistake. And that costly mistake was I played DK Metcalf instead of Stephon Diggs. And the other thing is Josh Allen, my quarterback. I lost 145.3 to 140. I had the 140. Josh Allen only put up 6.9 points against me against the Browns. And yeah, he didn't throw a single touchdown. If Josh Allen threw one touchdown pass, I would have won. So you let me know down below who, I guess we'll say, sold me more. Would it be Josh Allen not throwing a touchdown against the Browns? Or would it be me, myself, not playing Stephon Diggs against, the Ravens over playing DK Metcalf against the Lions? Now, you could argue both because if I did that, Josh Allen wouldn't have needed to throw a touchdown pass. I would have won. And if running on my backup quarterback it is Sam Darnold, who he put up 19 and a half. But you all saw the last time, previous, like the first time that, Seattle played the Rams this season. I ain't gonna say much about that. But that's enough. We're gonna talk about the Eagles versus Bills, but I think it could be the game of the week. Both of these teams run the tush push, so there's gonna be dialogue about the tush push after this game. I think that this game might go down to whoever has the ball last, and I think the Bills are gonna have the ball last. Give me the Bills to win this game 31-28. The other game that I think could be game of the week, the Bears versus the 49ers. The 49ers had a great Monday night game against Phillip Rivers, and I think that, the Bears, they offer a different test offensively and defensively. I think that this is going to be a bit more, yes, I think that this game is going to have some points, but I think there's going to be their fair share of defensive moments. I'm going to take the Bears to win this one 27-21. I think if the 49ers were at full strength with Nick Bosa, Fred Wagner, not Wagner, I'm sorry, I combined Bobby Wagner and Fred Warner, and, the other defensive players, I would probably take the 49ers. But I think the Bears, I think they have the advantage. I do think the 49ers are a very well coached team, and I don't think this is, any thing that's going to affect them. I do think that this is a game that the Bears need to win, simply just because if the 49ers somehow steal, the number one seed from Seattle, this game might affect the playoff picture, basically between the number one and number two seed. And then finally, to close out the sports episode of the I Am Passionate podcast, we have the Rams versus the Falcons. I do think Matthew Stafford should be the MVP. Let me throw that out there now. I think he threw for about 450 yards against Seattle last week. I think he's been playing out of his mind. And I think the only person that I can think of at the top of my head, because Matthew Stafford, I believe, as of right now, has 40 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. The only person to have, like a similar ratio to touchdown to the interceptions this far in the season would be Aaron Rodgers in like 2020, 2021, when he got the MVP. And, that's just me comparing it to the past. But I don't think there's been a quarterback better in football this season besides from, than Matthew Stafford. Even Baker Mayfield early in the season, he has not been playing as well as Matthew Stafford has. Give me the Rams to win this one 34-17. That is it for the I Am Passionate podcast. Let me know if for, the next couple of weeks, going up until the Super Bowl, if you want me to combine, some NBA talk with some NFL talk. Let me know in the comments down below. I will greatly appreciate your feedback. And I just want to say thank you all for listening to the I Am Passionate podcast. This is your host, Jaron Smith, and I'll catch you all next time.